April the 20th, 2023. Guys, this video is in response to a comment that I read in the video I did last night, and that video had technical problems and I did not have time to go back and correct them all, so I shortened it, but I put the link. So I hope you got the message about that. Now, someone, I think they were from Iowa, mentioned that at the death of a spouse, and a lot of people may not be aware of this, and it's different in every state. You may want to check your state, that Medicaid and all would have to be paid back, and it deals with taking your estate, everything you have. So I thought it would be worth reading this, and it says repayment of Medicaid under Iowa's estate recovery law, but you may want to change Iowa to where you live and see what your state is doing about this, because it's kind of a national system and a federal system, so be aware of where you're standing, because there may be things you can do about it to change it. But it says Iowa's estate recovery law requires the state of Iowa to be reimbursed from the estate of a person who has received benefits under certain Medicaid programs. It applies to some people under the age of 55 who are residents of long-term care facilities. It says it also applies to people who are 55 years of age or older who receive certain other types of Medicare benefits, including the elderly waiver and the Medicaid waiver programs, the medically needy program, and the Iowa Health Wellness Program, and its predecessor program, Iowa Care. Your state includes any property you own at your death, including real estate, bank accounts, excess funds in a burial trust, and interest in trust. The estate recovery law also applies to property you own as joint tenants with another person, life estates, and annuities. The law does not apply to proceeds of life insurance policies that are paid to someone other than your estate. The estate recovery law allows certain expenses to be paid. Assets can be used to pay the cost of administering your estate, reasonable funeral and burial expenses, reasonable and necessary medical expenses of your last illness, and taxes, having preference over all debt. Remaining assets may be used to reimburse the state for expenses paid by Medicaid. The waiver and deferral section of this. Now, guys, again, this section called waiver and deferral, it says repayment of Medicaid benefits is waived if repayment would reduce the amount received from your state by a surviving spouse or by a surviving child who is under the age of 21, blind, or permanently or totally disabled at the time of your death. If repayment is waived because of a surviving spouse or child who is blind or disabled, then repayment of the Medicaid benefit is due at the time of the death of the spouse or the child. To the extent that the spouse or child inherited assets from you, repayment can also be waived if it would cause an undue hardship because of limited income and assets. Now, guys, nothing is free in life, and we've seen a lot of changes come down the pipeline, changing from the original Medicare and stuff like that to the Obamacare situation. But they can pretty much take what they want to, and it looks like a land grab, property grab, much like we are looking at in the video last night, just to break it down to you. Many people pay taxes for their Medicare, or they're paying on Medicare, if you got both parts, a couple $100 a month for that. But again, this is Medicaid, so I'm not sure if it applies to both. And it may be different in each state, but to me, it looks like, and especially, it looks like the fact that the more people that die, the quicker you die, the quicker they can take your property. And it doesn't even have to be eminent domain at that point. And with the disease that's been going on the last 3 years almost now, that they don't talk about that much, since the damage has been done, and a lot of people are really feeling the effects of that, if you know what I mean. And kind of, it's like it's speeding up this process, just like in the video last night, of confiscation of your property, losing your loans, things like that. And in the video last night, they were talking about people with good credit having to pay more to make up for the people with poor credit so they can get them into the homes, right? Lower interest rates and all. You pay a higher interest rate. It's communism. That's what we said. But in this case, in that video, I mentioned the fact that how many people would lose their property and then it would go to the banks. That's what we're seeing here, and especially with the elevated scale that we've seen from the the last 3 years. Probably seeing a lot more of this type filing now because a lot of people have lost their life. It says, in a married couple where only one spouse is on Medicaid, estate recovery often can be avoided by making sure all assets in the name of the spouse receiving the Medicare are transferred into the name of the community spouse. These transfers should include the transfer-exempt assets like your home and car, so that the Medicaid recipient does not own anything at death. The community spouse should also revive his or her will so that if he or she dies before the Medicaid recipient, Medicaid eligibility would be less affected. Finally, since a person receiving Medicaid benefits is required to claim a portion of his or her spouse's estate, if the spouse dies, the community spouse may want to put assets in a trust or in investments that are not affected by the requirements, such as life insurance and investment accounts that have beneficiaries. The executor of the personal representative of the Medicaid recipient and the administrator of the nursing facility or other long-term care facility are required to report the death of a Medicaid recipient to the DHS within 10 days of the date of death. The personal representative or executor of the recipient's estate will have personal liability for the Medicaid debt if funds that are subject to being repaid to the state for Medicare are instead dispersed in some other manner. The rules for qualifying for Medicaid are often complex and confusing. You may call the legal hotline for older Iowans, and there's a number at 1-800-992-8161 if you have questions or you would like more information. Now, this is not just directed at Iowa, but you should look up each state, whatever state you're in, and let's go back to the top, and you would type in repayment of Medicare under the estate or your state's estate recovery law, and look at some of the in and outs of the deal. And again, you can there are hotlines that will allow you to call people. They may cost you something in the long run for them to keep you from getting completely taken advantage of, but you need to be aware of this. Anytime they come to help, be very aware. Buyer beware. We're watching it, guys. You watch it. It's a heads up. Be safe.